Okay, let's unpack this. I want to start with a quote that, in hindsight, feels a little bit like a prophecy. It's 2015.
Hmm.
Mary Barra, the CEO of General Motors, stands up and says something that, well, it sounds completely paradoxical for the head of a century-old manufacturing giant.
Right.
She says, "We're going to disrupt ourselves, and we're disrupting ourselves, so we're not trying to preserve a model of yesterday."
It is such a bold statement. Disrupt ourselves.
Yeah.
I mean, it's the kind of thing you expect to hear from a 20-something in a hoodie, coding in a garage in Palo Alto.
Exactly. Not the CEO of Detroit's biggest automaker.
No.
But here's the scenario, and this is where it gets really interesting for me. It's early 2016. If you look at GM's bank account,
Yeah.
they are crushing it.
Oh, absolutely. They fully recovered from that massive 2009 bankruptcy everyone remembers.
They pulled in, what, $145.9 billion in revenue in 2015 alone? Buicks and Chevys are just flying off the lots.
Financially, on paper, they looked incredibly robust. I mean, they'd restructured, they dealt with labor contracts, profits were up. If you were just looking at the balance sheet, you'd say this is a company in its prime.
So you have this company making money hand over fist, but then you look at the underlying numbers and there's this crack in the foundation.
Hmm.
Their market share dropped from 17% to 15%, and the stock price is just sitting there, stagnant.
Yeah.
It's like a person who looks healthy on the outside but has really worrying blood work. And Mary Barra is looking at this and basically saying, if we don't blow up our own business model, someone else will.
And that is the central tension of this whole deep dive. We are looking at a classic innovator's dilemma. You have a massive, successful incumbent GM trying to pivot to survive in the sharing economy.
Specifically, we're looking at that big gamble.
The strategic gamble to invest $500 million in Lyft.
$500 million.
$500 million. And the question we really need to answer today is, was this a dinosaur trying to learn to dance? Or was it just a desperate panic move to buy relevance?
I love that image, the dancing dinosaur. But before we get to the Lyft deal, which is huge, we have to understand what scared them so much. Because if I'm selling 10 million cars a year, I'm feeling pretty good about myself.
You think so?
What was keeping GM executives awake at night?
It was the data. The data coming out about the next generation of buyers, the millennials. The numbers were just undeniable and, frankly, terrifying for Detroit.
Okay.
In the U.S., if you looked at 16 to 24-year-olds in the year 2000, 76% of them had a driver's license.
Right. Seems normal.
By 2013, that dropped to 71%.
That's a 5% drop.
It-
Is that really enough to cause a panic? It sounds like a rounding error.
It sounds small, but you have to look at the trend line. It wasn't just about licenses. It was about desire. It was a fundamental shift in values. Millennials were favoring experiences over assets. Think about the cultural shift. In the 1960s, a car was freedom. It was the American dream in chrome.
Right.
By 2016, a car was just a bill.
Yeah, I guess that makes sense. It's the experience economy. Why buy a cow when you can just, order a burger on an app? It's about usership versus ownership.
Precisely. They didn't want the hassle. They didn't want the insurance bill, the parking tickets, the repairs. And this created a fragmented market.
Right. The sources break it down into, 3 types of consumers?
Yep. You had your urban drivers, your suburban drivers, and then the remote drivers.
The rural or remote drivers, they still need trucks. That hasn't changed. And suburban drivers still need to haul kids to soccer practice. But that urban segment, that's where the fire was starting.
Exactly. In cities, congestion is high, parking is expensive, and public transit or ride sharing is easy. These people were ready to ditch cars entirely.
And there is that one statistic in our research that it just blew my mind. From John Zimmer, the co-founder of Lyft.
Oh, I know the one you're talking about, the inefficiency one.
I read this 3 times to make sure it wasn't a typo. He said that cars are parked 96% of the time.
It is staggering, isn't it?
96%. I'm doing the math in my head right now. I drive to work. That's maybe 30 minutes. My car sits in the lot for 8 hours. I drive home. It sits in the driveway all night. It really is a $30,000 lawn ornament.
That's the ludicrous stat, as they call it. We spend $2 trillion a year on car ownership in the U.S., and we only use the product 4% of the time.
It's insane.
If you bought a toaster and only used it once a year, you'd feel ripped off. But we do it with cars because for a long time, there was no alternative.
But then the alternative arrived.
The disruption,
Yeah.
that 96% of downtime, is value just waiting to be unlocked. And the market knew it. By 2016, you had Uber. It had been around less than 10 years, yet it was valued at $68 billion.
Which was more than GM.
More than GM and Ford. Think about that. A tech app that owned 0 cars, had no factories, no inventory, was worth more than the companies manufacturing the actual vehicles.
That has to sting. If I'm Mary Barra, that's the moment I realize the game has completely changed.
It's not just that the game changed. The competitors changed. GM wasn't just fighting Ford or Toyota anymore. They were fighting an ecosystem of digital services.
Right, like Tesla.
Tesla was out there pushing software updates that made the car better after you bought it. Uber was changing how people moved. Barta realized GM couldn't just be a manufacturer. They had to become a mobility service.
So how do you turn a ship that big? I mean, GM is huge, it's bureaucratic, it's slow. My image of GM is just guys in suits having meetings about meetings.
You're not wrong. That's the hurdle.
Huh.
To survive, they had to adopt what the sources call venture thinking.
Venture thinking. Okay, break that down for me. What does that actually look like inside a company like GM?
It's essentially trying to act like a startup inside a massive corporate body. Traditionally, car companies use waterfall planning.
Waterfall planning.
Imagine a waterfall. It only flows one way. You spend 3 years designing the car, then 2 years engineering it, then you build the factory tooling, and finally, 5 years later, you sell the car.
Everything's planned up front.
Everything. You can't change your mind halfway through because you've already bought the steel.
Yeah.
If you realize the steering wheel looks ugly in year 3, it's too late.
Right.
But software startups, they use Agile.
Yeah.
They build a skateboard, test it, get feedback, turn it into a scooter, then a bike. They run small experiments and pivot constantly. Barra wanted GM to act like that.
Which sounds great on a PowerPoint slide, but culturally, that seems almost impossible. We have a quote here from Chet Uber, who ran a program at GM. He said, "If you try to do something profoundly disruptive within a large company, the core business will probably smother it."
And he's right. Think about it. The core business of GM is safety and reliability.
Yeah.
If you move fast and break things in software, you get a bug.
If you move fast and break things in car manufacturing, people die.
Exactly. You can't beta test a brake pedal.
Yeah.
So you have this massive clash of cultures, safety versus speed.
Yeah.
But, and this is a fascinating nuance, GM actually had a secret weapon. They weren't total strangers to this. They had something tucked away in their portfolio that was pure tech.
You're talking about OnStar.
I am.
I totally forgot OnStar was a subscription service. I just remember the commercials with the blue button on the rearview mirror.
It was software as a service before that was even a buzzword. GM effectively invented the connected car 20 years prior with OnStar. They had remote diagnostics, turn-by-turn navigation, emergency response.
They had the DNA for it.
They did. Barra's goal was to take that DNA and pivot from just selling a car to owning the customer relationship beyond the car.
Okay, so they have the ambition, they have the venture thinking strategy, or at least the desire for it. Now they need a partner. Enter Lyft.
January 2016, GM drops the news. A $500 million investment in Lyft.
Okay, I have to play devil's advocate here. $500 million. $500 million. GM is a manufacturing giant. They have thousands of engineers. Why not just build their own app? Why give $500 million to a startup for a minority stake?
That is the $500 million question, and the answer lies in something economists call the network effect.
I hear that term thrown around a lot. How does it apply here?
Simply put, the value of a service increases as the number of users grows. You can write the code for a ride-sharing app in a weekend. But the code isn't the product.
The people are the product.
The drivers and the riders are the product. If I launch GM Ride today, I have 0 drivers, so no riders open the app. And because no riders open the app, no drivers sign up.
The chicken and egg problem.
Exactly. Lyft already had the liquidity. They had the network. GM knew how to bend metal and build engines. Lyft knew how to connect a rider with a driver instantly. By investing, GM wasn't buying code. They were buying a seat at a table that was already full of people.
And they weren't just throwing money at them. They had a plan to work together, right? They launched something called Express Drive.
Right. This was the synergy play. You have Lyft drivers who want to drive, but maybe their car is too old or they don't own one.
And GM has lots of cars.
GM has lots of cars. So Express Drive allowed GM to rent vehicles directly to Lyft drivers. GM gets the rental fee, they get a car on the road, and they get a slice of the ride revenue.
And I assume they get the data.
Crucial point. You cannot improve the customer experience in this new economy without data. GM needed to know how people were moving through cities. Toyota was doing the same thing. They invested in Uber for the exact same reason. It was an information arms race.
So that's the ride-sharing side, but GM didn't stop there. They also decided to launch their own brand, something called Maven. And I feel like we need to distinguish this because I was confused at first. Lyft is ride-sharing. Maven is car-sharing.
Correct. Ride sharing is when someone drives you like a taxi. That's Lyft. Car sharing is when you rent a car for a short period, say an hour, and drive it yourself. Think Zipcar.
Got it. So Maven was GM's answer to Zipcar.
Yes, but with a venture thinking twist. To build Maven, GM went on a bit of a shopping spree. They acquired the assets of a startup called Sidecar.
Sidecar. I vaguely remember the name. Didn't they go under?
They did. They were a casualty of the Uber-Lyft wars.
So why would GM go dumpster diving for a failed startup? If they failed, clearly their tech wasn't that great, right?
Not necessarily. They failed because they couldn't compete on the network effect. They didn't have the cash to subsidize rides like Uber did.
Right.
But their technology was actually excellent.
Ah.
Sidecar held key intellectual property for efficient transportation routing and e-hailing. This gave GM the tech backbone they needed for Maven without having to build it from scratch.
That's smart, buying the bones to build the body. But there's this other detail in the case study about how they launched Maven that I found weird. They use WhatsApp.
It is weird, isn't it?
It's bizarre that you're General Motors, you have billions of dollars, and you're telling customers, hey, just text us on this free messaging app if you want a car. It sounds so cheap.
It might have seemed unprofessional to the old guard, but this was pure, lean startup methodology. If they had done it the GM way, they would have spent 2 years and $10 million building the perfect customer service portal.
Right.
By using WhatsApp, they could launch in weeks. It was raw, it was fast, and it gave them immediate, unfiltered data on what users wanted.
So they were faking it until they made it.
Exactly. They were validating the business before scaling the tech.
I guess that's the venture thinking in action. So let's zoom out a bit. We have Lyft for ride sharing. We have Maven for car sharing. We have the Chevy Bolt for electric. It feels like they are trying to cover every possible way a human can move.
GM defined it as 4 pillars. First, electric vehicles, that's the Bolt. Second, autonomous cars. They acquired a company called Cruise Control to handle that. Third, connected cars. That's the evolution of OnStar. And fourth, sharing, which is the Maven and Lyft combination.
It sounds like a solid fortress. But the problem is GM wasn't the only one building a fortress. The entire industry was freaking out.
Oh, absolutely. It was a gold rush. Ford launched Ford Smart Mobility and bought a shuttle service called Chariot.
Oh man, Chariot. I remember seeing those vans. They were like fancy buses.
Essentially crowdsourced commuter shuttles.
Yeah, and what happened to them?
They imploded. Ford shut it down a few years later.
Why? If the sharing economy is the future, why did Ford fail with Chariot while GM was doubling down?
Because mobility is hard. Chariot failed because the economics didn't work.
Yeah.
It's very expensive to drive vans around if they aren't full. It goes back to that network effect. If you don't have density, you lose money on every mile.
Or warning sign.
A huge warning sign that just throwing money at mobility doesn't guarantee success.
Right. And then you have the Germans. Daimler, who owns Mercedes, partnered with Uber. They also bought a mapping tech company called Here alongside Audi and BMW.
And Honda unveiled the Nuvi.
The new electric urban vehicle.
Yes. The concept was wild. The idea was that when you aren't driving it, the car drives itself around and earns money for you.
It's like your car's a side hustle. Sorry, I can't pick you up. My car's working a shift.
It sounds futuristic, but that is logically where the shared and autonomous pillars meet. And that connects right back to why GM invested in Lyft. It wasn't just about taxis.
It was a play for the driverless future.
Yes. Because if you have self-driving cars, you need a network to deploy them. You're not going to sell a self-driving car to an individual immediately. You're going to put it in a fleet.
Right.
Precisely. GM President Dan Emmon explicitly said that a ride-sharing network is the logical first place to deploy driverless technology. If GM builds the autonomous car through Cruise and Lyft provides the network of passengers, you have a closed loop of profit.
It's the perfect marriage. GM builds the robot, Lyft tells the robot where to go. But, and there is always a but in these stories, marriages in Silicon Valley seem to be open marriages.
That's a polite way to put it.
GM puts $500 million into Lyft. They think they're partners, but what does Lyft do?
They kept their options open. Even after taking GM's money, Lyft partnered with Waymo.
Waymo, which is Google's self-driving car project.
And GM's direct competitor in the autonomous space.
Ouch, that has to feel like a betrayal. I gave you $500 million and you're hanging out with Google.
It just shows the power dynamics of the new economy. Money doesn't buy exclusivity. These ecosystems are fluid. Lyft needed the best tech to survive. If Google had better self-driving tech than GM, Lyft wasn't going to ignore it, just to be polite to Mary Barra.
So what does this all mean? We've got Mary Barra pivoting a century-old giant We've got investments in Lyft, Maven, Cruise. We've got a total reimagining of what a car company is.
It represents a fundamental shift from a make-and-sell model to a mobility service model. GM used its massive cash pile to try and buy its way into a future where people might not buy cars at all.
It's the difference between saying I sell toasters and I sell the ability to have warm bread.
In a way, yes. And for you, the listener, this matters because it signals the end of the era of my car and the beginning of the era of a car. The vehicle becomes a utility, like electricity or water. You don't own the power plant. You just flip the switch.
That's a powerful way to put it. But I want to leave everyone with a final thought, something that was in the source material that is, frankly, a little terrifying if you work in Detroit.
You're thinking of the OECD study.
I am. The Organization for Economic Cooperation and Development ran the numbers. They modeled a city with good public transport and a fleet of shared, self-driving cars. And they wanted to know how many cars you'd actually need to move everyone around.
And the result?
They found you could remove 90% of the cars from the streets and still get everyone where they need to go.
90%.
So here is the question that keeps coming back to me. If 90% of the cars disappear, what happens to a company whose entire business model is based on selling 10 million cars a year?
That is the ultimate paradox. Is Mary Barra investing in GM's survival? Or is she investing in its obsolescence? If they succeed in creating this shared, efficient future, they fundamentally shrink the market for their primary product.
They're racing to build a future that might not need them, or at least not nearly as many of them. It's a brave new world, and GM is trying to build it before it destroys them. That's all for this deep dive. Thanks for listening.